Yo. Alright. Okay. I think we good on this. Alright, so phase two, right around the corner, right? Minus 6 days. Got a lot of upfront information about it. As you guys already know, I did the video where I went over all of the Nomergon weapons. Probably gonna do the armor as well. Didn't really touch the runes yet because I wanted to wait and see what was happening. We still there's still some things broken about the runes on Wowhead. Not broken, I won't say broken. Maybe just unrevealed, we'll say. And I'll go over what all that we know and what we have right now, but do bear in mind that I'm probably gonna do like a follow up or update to this video. Just because that again we don't have all the information, and I want to make sure that I try to keep up to date at the very least. You know what I mean? So, and what I mean by like things aren't fully there. Like I have the Shaman Season of Discovery runes up right now, but the Shaman only shows the chest, hands, and legs, which we got, but they only show the waist and the feet as the new ones. Whereas like if we go to the Druid one, the Druid has waist, wrists, and feet. So some of them are missing the wrists, some of them are missing the waist. If you look at the Rogue one, the Rogue has Shadow Step listed as a belt rune, but it also has Shadow Step listed as a leg rune. So just little things like that. Little things like that that I'm gonna have to correct myself on when it comes up to it later on. But that being said, let's get started and go through the data mine runes. So as you can see, Wowhead has graciously updated their talent build system or talent tool to include the data mine runes. And I'm gonna go through all of them, mainly focusing on the new runes because I think we've spoken at length about the regular runes we've been playing around with for the past couple of months. So there's really no reason to go like into the fundamentals. We know what they do. We really don't know, but I will go over like the combos, I guess, quote unquote, you'd have, or the implications certain runes have, or the synergy certain runes have with one another. I will go over that. So let's start with Druid. Let's start with Druid because Druid, like I said, was kind of one of the unsung tank specs, but they get a lot of good runes. So the first new slot is the head slot on the Druid, and I have Gore in that rune slot. But here's all the new runes. They have Gale Winds, which really only balanced druids really care about this. But Hurricane's such a strong spell that I think most druid specs can make use out of it. I don't know if you're actually going to use this rune to really cast a Hurricane, but it's there. It increases the damage of your Hurricane by 100%, removes the cooldown, and reduces the mana cost by 20%. Amazing damage and quality of life for a Druid AoE. Amazing. Hurricane was a really kind of bad spell before. It took way too much mana. And it had not a long cooldown, but it had a cooldown, whereas something like Rain of Fire didn't have a cooldown. Something if you want to kind of compare apples to apples. So Gale Winds is a pretty good rune. Not really practical for tanking, but it's there. Then we have Gore. So Gore is coming off of a more modern style druid passive, but season of discovery. Jesus, their style is striking a target with lacerate, swipe, or maul will give you a 15% chance to reset the cooldown on your bear mangle. And if you're in cat form, striking with mangle or shred will give you a 5% chance to refresh Tiger's Fury. Refreshing Tiger's Fury is so crazy because of what the new Tiger's Fury does, or what the new rune interaction with Tiger Fury does. So that's kind of crazy. I don't know if that's meant to be that way, because baseline Tiger's Fury really isn't that crazy. But I think it's called King of the Jungle. I don't remember which rune slot it was in. Here we go. King of the Jungle, yeah. If it works with this one, Tiger's Fury now increases all physical damage done by 15% and gives you 60 energy, but it has a 30-second cooldown. Like, if Gore works with the King of the Jungle Tiger's Fury, that's kind of crazy. But we're talking about bears here. Anyway. So, yeah. So, Gore giving your bear abilities, Lacerate, Swipe, and Maul, a 15% chance to reset the cooldown on Mangle is pretty good. Obviously, this is a single target, both damage and threat increase, because the more mangles you dish out, the more threat you'll have, and the more damage you'll do. I wish that this version of Gore also removed the rage cost of Mangle, kind of like how like Sword and Board removes the rage cost for Shield Slam. I wish that's what this was here. Maybe because since it's 3 abilities instead of 2, and we'll get to Sword and Board, but since it's 3 abilities here instead of the 2 that activate Sword and Board, maybe instead of 100% rage cost, maybe you reduce the rage cost on Mangle by 50%. So, because Druids still have that rage issue, right? Where a lot of their abilities cost, not a lot of their abilities, but their stable single target abilities, namely Mangle and Lacerate, both cost a lot of rage. So I would like to see Gore reduce the rage cost on that procced Mangle, but otherwise it's still a really good single target, both damage and threat increase for bears, which is, I think, needed. The next new rune in the helm slot is the improved bark skin. This is really, really good quality of life for defensives. So your bark skin can now be cast on allies, kind of like how Iron Bark is on retail. It no longer gives you a penalty on melee combat speed or spell cast time, and you can use it while shapeshifting. And that's kind of what the biggest drawback. It removes the biggest drawbacks to bark skin, right? Not being able to be cast in animal form. So you have to leave bear form to cast it, and it was on the GCD, so you couldn't power shift it, and it slowed your attack speed. So now it doesn't do either of those things, and you can cast it on someone else. That's a really good quality of life change. I would think that if you're a bear druid, like if you're a mainstay druid tank, like you don't DPS at all, you probably use this on yourself. If you're a hybrid boy, you probably can shift this on your main tank and help them reduce some damage taken. But this is really good. I would say maybe during the during the gearing up process of Gnormorgon, this is probably something that you use like before we have a lot of gear, when you're taking those big hits in the new raid bosses and learning mechanics. Improved bark skin is probably something that you want to run, but once people get comfortable, once the parse boys start joining the fray, Gore is probably going to be the one. And for some people, Gore's going to be the one over Rip. Like, they're not going to care. Like, they have the gear, sufficient enough to tank whatever. So Gore might just be the move. I just think Gore is going to be definitely what we'll see on Warcraft logs in the latter parts of mid to latter of phase 2. So I think these two are interchangeable, but Gore is probably the one. On the waist, we have the option of Berserk, Eclipse, or Nourish. Obviously, only one of these things really work for feral tanks, and that's Berserk. When activated, this causes your Mangle ability to hit up to 3 targets and have no cooldown, and reduce the energy cost of your cat form abilities by 50%, lasts 15 seconds, and requires you to be in animal form to activate. This also breaks fear and makes you immune, so that's pretty good too. I guess it can be used kind of like an emergency fear break. Again, really strong, boosting up your Mangle, giving it some cleave. I still would have liked to see it reduce the rage in some way, shape, or form. But other than that, it's still a really good rune, and it's the only rune that bears can really make use of. So Berserk is an easy slot, and there's not really much competition to be had there. The next is the wrist slot, and we get F-Flow or Improved Frenzy Regen. Again, this is really only one area where bears can really work, and that's Improved Frenzy Regen, and it's really good. So it changes your Frenzied Regen. Your Frenzy Regen can now be used in all forms, not just bear, and now converts your active resource into health. So whatever you're using. So if you are in cat form, it'll use your energy. If you're in bear form, it'll use rage, and if you're in caster form, it'll use your mana. It'll use 5% of your base mana for 10% health. And this is really good because that was like the really real big issue with old frenzied regen, is that it was so weak. It was so weak and it cost you rage. It was really weak and it cost you rage. Now it's pretty strong. 10 health per 10% of your, or 10 rage for 10% health is a pretty decent trade-off, and it's usable in all forms. So that's really good. I would say the only drawback, it's not even a drawback, the only gripe I guess I would say is without a cancel aura macro, I don't know if there's a way to turn it off, right? Like, I don't know if you can hit the frenzy regen button and turn it off again. That would be my only gripe. But again, that a cancel aura macro just fixes that, so that's not even a real thing. So, but yeah, frenzy regen is the only thing here. We're not going to take F-Flow, so this is another easy defensive boost here. Easy clap. And then the last new slot we have is the feat slot. We have King of the Jungle, Survival Instincts, and Dream State. So Dream State is for casters, right? Your damaging spell crits have give you 50% mana regen. King of the Jungle we talked about a little bit before. That's the Tiger's Trade now is a real cooldown instead of a not so good cooldown. And then we have Survival Instincts. So Survival Instincts really just got pulled straight out of Wrath, where it gives you 30% of your maximum health for 20 seconds. Once it expires, your health is lost. It's usable in any form, which is, I think that's a new change. I don't think Survival Instincts was able to be used outside of bear form and Wrath. But in addition, you generate 5 rage every time you dodge while in bear form or dire bear form. You generate 10 energy when you dodge in cat form, or 1% of your maximum mana if you dodge in any other form, right? So, 2 things I want to talk about with the Survival Instincts thing. Number 1, it's a really good cooldown, right? 30% max health might as well be shield wall in vanilla standard forms, right? And for bears, right? You get 30% of your max health while buffed, you're going to be a chunky boy. Ain't really much that's going to kill you. So that's really cool. The second part of this rune, I don't know if that's a passive or if that's just while Survival Instincts is active. So that second part comes from a talent called Natural Reaction. It's one of my favorite druid talents that they introduced. So and it basically does the same thing. Every time you dodge while in your bear form, you gain rage, which is really good because bears dodge all the time. They can't parry, they can't block, so dodging is their main source of avoidance. So they do it, and getting rage from avoiding damage is really, really good. So this kind of gives you a semi-consistent form of rage generation, right? It's better than nothing, and it helps mitigate or offset some of the expensive costs to rage from Mangle and Maul, right? So especially if you're getting like a lot of gore procs, it's gonna help mitigate that. So I like that. I like Survival Instincts. I like Improved Frenzy Regen. I like Berserk. Like bear druids really got a lot of good power and quality of life changes for not really like losing any trade out, right? Like there's not really any other runes that you're losing out on to get Survival Instincts, right? You're not losing out anything to get Improved Frenzy Regen. So druids got a lot of power and both offensive and defensive without having to give up any big things, because their other rune slots don't have any competition with what bears would use. So that's really, really good. Really good. The other runes are pretty much mainstays, right? We know Survival of the Fittest is really good. Obviously, you can swap that out for Wild Strikes if you feel like you don't really need it, if you want to give the buff to help some speed runs. So those 2 are interchangeable to me. Skull Bash, if you need an interrupt. We saw with Kelris, interrupts are pretty important. I can only imagine that it would probably also be important in Nomargon. I'm sure at least one boss is going to have something to interrupt, so Skull Bash is probably there for you. The other ones don't really work for bears, so it doesn't really matter. And then last word, you could put... So since we have Gore, you probably want to run Mangle now, because Gore still works with Swipe or Maul, which is abilities that bears are using anyway. So I feel like Mangle probably is the one that we're going to see, become more popular over Lacerate. I know they both got rage nerfs, like they not rage, rage reductions, we'll call it, not nerfs. I don't want to say nerfs. But I think Mangle is the one that you're probably going to want to use because of its, synergy with Gore and its synergy with Berserk. So Mangle is probably the one. I think that's probably like an oversight with Berserk. Berserk doesn't have any interaction with Lacerate, so it kind of forces you into Mangle. So there you have it. But Mango's a good ability, so being forced into a good ability isn't a bad thing. But I think Bears are going to be really, really strong. Like a lot of their issues from Phase 1 seem to be getting the the Band-Aid treatment for Phase 2. So, and plus they're getting access to their latter talents like Heart of the Wild, like Leader of the Pack, Savage Fury, right? So they're going to be pretty decent, hopefully offensively. Like defensively they were always pretty good. Offensively they kind of waned when compared to the other tank, but this is a really good combination of offense and defense without losing much on either side. Like there's no big trade-off, so this is really good. Bears are going to be looking really, really good. All right, what's next in line? We got Warriors. Warriors also, I think, are going to be really, really good because Warriors just get a lot of good spells on the level up, as you can see down here. They get a lot of good spells right at, pardon me, right at 28 early into the leveling process with Season of Discovery. They get Shield Wall, the best defensive in the game. So Warriors are really going to be really, really solid on their both their spells that they learn level up and their runes. But let's talk about it. So I think one of the biggest power gains for Warriors going into 40 is their Shield Slam ability. They no longer have to just rely on Raging Blow for single target threat, which is kind of like, I won't say their weakness because Warriors could still do it. They still had things like the Devastate Thunder Armor, right? So, which did a lot of threat. So they weren't really like weak in terms of single target, but they could get overtaken by Warlocks and other high damage dealers, single target damage dealers. But, pardon me, Jesus. Having Shield Slam is going to help mitigate a lot of that. Being able to go 5 points into Defiance is going to help mitigate a lot of that. So, Warriors going to get boosted there. But let's look at the runes. First, let's start with the Helm slot. We have Shield Mastery, Taste for Blood, or Vigilance. So, this is kind of a polarizing thing. Hold on one second. Let me just take a sip of water real quick. Because unlike the Druid, which is kind of like, all right, I'm just going to pick this thing because it's good, Warriors kind of have a choice, right? So, on the gear up process, I think Vigilance probably is the option because it reduces the damage taken by your target, probably the other tank who's really taking the most damage, right? It reduces their damage taken by 3% and transfers 10% of the threat they cause to the warrior. So let's say you put that on a Warlock tank who's generating a lot of single target threat. You'll be right there with them if you put Vigilance on them because 10% of their threat is going to be given to you. So that's really, really good. Helps warriors, especially when they're not tanking, helps warriors keep up their threat, especially if there's like, fights where I think like the Crowd Pummeler is probably the biggest candidate to have like a what is it called? Unrelenting Strikes type thing where like the boss does an attack on the second highest threat target. So you kind of look at it like that. But I think Vigilance is probably going to be the choice on the level up. But for like the Warcraft Parse boys, Shield Master is probably going to be the one. Increasing your physical damage by 10% when you have a shield is really, really good. Reducing the disarm stuff, that's more like PvP. I don't really know too many PvE bosses that disarm you. Like, there's some trash mobs that do it. That's cool, but disarming really isn't like a thing for real in PvE when it comes to boss tanking. So the 10% physical damage is really, really good. Obviously, this bolsters your shield slams. This bolsters if you're still using Raging Blow, your Raging Blow. All of your heroic strikes, all your abilities get that flat 10% boost, which kind of offsets the reduction from defensive stance, because defensive stance I think gives you I think it's 10%. Let me just double check real quick. Defensive stance. Here it is. It is 10%. Yeah, it reduces your 10%. It reduces your damage done by 10%. So Shield Master kind of offsets that. I don't know if it's like an additive ratio, like you lose 10% from defensive stance, and then Shield Master just gives you back that 10%, so it kind of puts you at net zero, net neutral. I don't know if it's like that. I'd have to look into a little bit deeper, but any kind of boost helps. So doing 10% more damage while in defensive stance that already gave you a 10% damage reduction but increased your threat, I think that's really good. I think Vigilance, like I said, Vigilance is going to be probably on the harder fights, on the ladder fights where you need more threat and more damage reduction from your other tank, but Shield Master is probably going to overtake that. Taste for Blood. So Taste for Blood really only works for DPS because I think Overpower only works in battle stance. But at any regard, Taste for Blood only procs off Rend, and there's a lot of mechanical bosses in Gnomeregan and a lot of mechanical mobs, I would imagine. So bleeding isn't really going to be at a premium. You know what I mean? So Taste for Blood kind of gets diminished, in my opinion, unless Blizzard like secretly just kind of allows mechanicals to take bleed damage. Who knows? They could do that, because I would imagine if you're adding a rune that procs off of bleeds, but then we're going into a raid that where a lot of the mobs will be immune to bleeds. It's kind of like trolling them. You're trolling them a little bit. But I'm just gonna go ahead and say that from what we know right now, mechanicals are immune to bleed damage, and Taste of Blood obviously only works for DPS because it procs overpower. So Shieldmaster, I think, will happen in the latter forms. Vigilance is always a good swap in, though. So these two are probably interchangeable. I'd pick Shieldmaster at the start. On the waste slot, we have Focused Rage. Oh, by the way, thanks. I'm bugging. Thanks for everybody who joined. My bad. I forgot to say what's up. Thank you for joining. Just going through the runes. You didn't really miss anything too important. I went over the Druid runes. I'll probably do a review. I am going to update this later on because not all of the runes have been data mined. Really quick, as you can see, all of the warrior ones have. So we have head, waist, feet, wrist, but like shamans only have feet and waist, no helm, no wrist. So I'm gonna have to come back and update once we really know what's gonna happen. So just a quick blurb, but back to warriors. So I was on, what was I doing? Waist, right? Yeah, waist. So we have Blood Surge, Focus Rage, and Precise Timing. I think Focus Rage is the best one for prot, to be quite honest with you. So Blood Surge is actually cool, but I have to check Slam. I think Slam might not require a stance per se. I don't think it does, but I'm just gonna double check. Let me see. No, it doesn't. So you could use Blood Surge and you could use Precise Timing because Slam doesn't require a stance as far as I'm concerned. I just checked it. But Slam won't do, probably, I'm going to say, probably won't do more threat or damage than Shield Slam. And reducing the rage cost of your main threat and damage dealer probably is better than getting a proc on Slam or making it instant but making it a 6-second cooldown. Just my opinion. Like, warriors kind of live and die by how many attacks they can actually land. That's why hit is so important. So what are you going to choose to hit with? A slam or a shield slam or a regular slam? I think shield slam is probably going to be the one. And reducing the rage cost, not just on shield slam, on all of your offensive abilities. So shield slam, heroic strike, cleave, thunderclap, sunder armor. Like, you really can't beat focus rage for a tank, in my opinion. I think focus rage is the one. For parse boys, yeah, the other ones are probably a little bit better. Maybe. I don't even think it's that far apart, to be quite honest with you. What is this? Heroic Strike, Bloodthirst Whirlwind have a 30% chance to make your next slam cost no rage. I don't even know if slam does that much damage for us to care like that about it. To have 2 runes dedicated to slam, I feel like, I don't know. But I think Focus Rage is the best one, to be quite honest with you. It provides too much quality of life. So I'm going to go Focus Rage. The chest runes, I'm gonna hold off on the new ones, the hands and the feet, because I want to talk about the chest rune real quick. So the chest rune, we know what these abilities are, right? We've seen these, we played with these for a couple of months now. Normally, you would pick Raging Blow at the level 25 bracket because warriors don't really have a big single target spender, right? They don't have Shield Slam yet. They're gonna get it now, so it kind of takes Raging Blow off the table for having to use because we have Shield Slam. So you can now slot in Flagellation and get that 25% physical damage bonus while after activating Blood Rage, which I think is a huge gain when you're talking about a warrior that has a 25% damage bonus, 10% from Shield Mastery, and reduced rage cost on their abilities. Like, this little trinity here is really, really good. Now, you can use Raging Blow. No, there's nothing saying that you can't, because it's probably gonna get reduced by Focus Rage, and it's going to get that 10% increase. But I think Flagellation is just way better, especially for burst threat, like where threat really matters. Like, threat really matters at the start of a fight or when something spawns, right? Because once you land a couple of hits, threat is kind of smoothed out. Like, after the first 4 seconds, 3-4 seconds, threat is kind of, you kind of know what it is. So Flagellation is going to help greatly. I don't know if Raging Blow will, you know what I mean? So I think Flagellation just has way more synergy with the other runes and stuff like that. So I would pick Flagellation. Warbringer is niche. You can use it, especially if we're moving around a lot. Like, there's probably going to be a lot of fights in Nomergon, I would imagine, where it is movement is key. So Warbringer could be a thing. I do want to say that Warbringer could be a thing. It really wasn't, to me, it wasn't really a thing in BFD. It wasn't really too much where you had to like move a lot in combat anyway. So charging in combat wasn't really super imperative, just in my experience. Other warriors or other players might have a different experience, just in my experience. But I think Warbringer might be a little bit more impactful in Nomergon. And Blood Frenzy, again, it's a good rage generator when you can bleed something. And if I'm not mistaken, there's just a lot of things that you can't bleed. So let's like, I know I've gone through this a couple times, but I'm gonna go through it real quick one more time. So like, what's the first boss? Grubbus. Grubbus is a Trog, so he probably can be bled. I would say he's probably susceptible to bleed damage, right? Actually, you know what? Before, because I don't really know all the bosses off the top of my head. Let me just look at it real quick. Nomergon Zone. Let's open it in a new tab. So yeah, Grubbus is a humanoid. I doubt they change him to mechanicals. He's probably one. Elementals, I don't know if they can be bled. I don't think elementals can bleed, to be quite honest with you. Like, I'm thinking back when I was playing hardcore and I was leveling a warrior and I was questing in Thousand Needles. And you know, like that area, that steam area where you got to go underwater and you got to pick the flower. I hated that quest, but there's a lot of elementals there, and I don't really remember Rend working on them. So I don't think elementals can be bled, to be quite honest with you. So don't want to stamp that, but I'm pretty sure they can't be. So that's the viscous fallout is one boss. Electrocutioners are mechanical. We already know mechanicals can't bleed. That's two. Crowd Pummeler is another boss. Mechanical, can't bleed. The Dark Iron Ambassador is the rare, which I think he's the one who got updated to being a boss. So he's a humanoid. He's probably fair game. Mechgineer Thermoplug, mechanical, can't be bled. That's 4 out of 6. So when it comes to using Blood Frenzy, you probably don't get a lot of value out of it. I'm gonna be real. So unless they change those bosses and no one knows yet, we'll see. But as it stands, you don't get a lot of use out of these bleed runes. So I'm gonna stick with Flagellation here. All right, let's go to Legs. So Legs got an additional rune. They now have access to Commanding Shout. Y'all know what Commanding Shout is. It's the party buff. It increases stamina for all party members in the last 2 minutes. Pretty good defensive rune. I would say you can probably make use of this if you don't need, or if you do need them, my bad. If you do need the extra defensive benefit. If not, you're probably still going to use Consumed by Rage. Just to help give you that melee attack bonus. If you want a little bit more AoE threat profile, you go Furious Thunder. But the easiest one to slot in is Commanding Shout. It's going to increase your survivability. I would imagine most warriors use this one as the progression for Nomergon gets better. Once you kind of are doing speed runs and we know what it is, we'll probably switch to Consumed by Rage. Easy clap. But Commanding Shout is probably to start off. And then in the mid to latter versions, or the mid to latter parts of Phase 2, Consumed by Rage is probably going to be the jump off for the majority of the warrior community, right? Next, let's go wrists. So wrists, we have Rampage, Sword and Board, and Wrecking Crew. So all three of these are pretty good. I'm not going to lie to you. I chose Sword and Board because I think it has the best synergy with your other runes and your innate toolkit. So Sword and Board, when you devastate or revenge, you have a 30% chance to refresh the cooldown on your shield slam and remove its rage costs. So you get an instant, well, not an instant, but you get, yeah, it's basically instant. You get an instant cooldown reduction on shield slam. So you can make your next move hit really hard and do a lot of threat. And you remove the rage cost. Really good for threat generation, really good for single target damage, really good for your rage economy. None of these other two don't really do that. These other two are damage boosts, but they don't improve your rage economy. They can improve your threat. Don't think they will more than continually proccing shield slam will. And Sword and Board is like a staple of warrior. Like Sword and Board is in the game right now in Dragonflight. So Sword and Board is a staple, and I think, like I said, it has more synergy with the other runes than these two do. But we can look at them. So let's look at Rampage. Warrior goes on a rampage, increasing attack power by 2%, causing most successful melee attacks to increase. Attack power by an additional 2%. Stacking 5 times lasts 30 seconds. This can only be used after scoring a critical hit. So once you get a crit, you get this rampage effect lasting 30 seconds. And your successful hits, things that don't miss, obviously, or get parried or dodged, will give you an attacking stack power increase. Because it's stacking, it's kind of a slow buildup. And like if you're getting dodged, if you're getting parried, if you're not at hit cap, you kind of like you run the risk. It's a long buff. 30 seconds is a long buff, but you run the risk of not being able to fully stack it and get the max value from it. So that's one thing. Number two, you probably won't have as much crit. Now, warriors like crit because they use agility. Agility gives crit, but you probably won't have as much crit as like a real DPS warrior. And there's no like crit modifiers for runes anyway, like some of the other tanks get. So don't know how much mileage you get out of this one. Or how much consistency you get out of it, because I don't know if a prot warrior is going to be able to just always stack this 5 times after a crit. I doubt it, to be quite honest with you. So there's that. And then we have Wrecking Crew. Your melee crits enrage you, increasing all physical damage done by 10%. So this is good, but this is tied to your crit as well. Again, I don't know how much crit you're going to have. The way I kind of like weird brained it is like, all right, Sword and Board has a 30% chance to proc off of Devastate and Revenge, right? If your crit isn't above 30%, right? Because if like, let's say you don't have 30% crit, or you do have 30% crit, then maybe it's worth using like a Wrecking Crew or a Rampage. But you just get a flat 30% chance off of 2 abilities to proc this. So I think Sword and Board is just the most consistent thing you're going to see. I don't think Wrecking Crew or Rampage are bad, especially like Wrecking Crew. Wrecking Crew just gives you the 10% physical damage. It's not stacking. It doesn't like once you crit, you get it. So Wrecking Crew might be something you get once you start gearing more towards crit. Like the Parse boys are gonna get their crit builds and their speed run builds. Then Wrecking Crew becomes a thing. So I think Wrecking Crew is more likely to become a thing than Rampage will for Prot Warriors. But for the majority, I think Sword and Board is just a better one. Next, let's look at the feat. We have Enrage Regeneration, Intervene, and Rallying Cry. So, Enrage Regeneration heals you for 30% of your maximum health over 10 seconds, so that's 3% of your max health every second, but can only be used while you're enraged, Berserker Rage, or Blood Rage is active. It's also usable while stunned. So, 3% of your max health every second isn't a bad thing. It's not a low amount, especially if you like have a lot of stamina. To me, it's weaker than Rallying Cry, right? Because Rallying Cry doesn't heal you, but it does increase your maximum health by 15%, so half of the effect for 10 seconds, but it's all up front, right? It's not a trickle. Like you don't get 1% or 1.5 every second. You just get 15% off rip, right? And I think that would save you more. That has more likely a chance to save you than getting 3% over and over and over. Because there's only a certain amount of things that trickle health will heal, right? Like this kind of like Enrage Regeneration kind of reminds me of like Second Wind. If you remember that talent where like if you were low, warriors just consistently regenerated health. But it's like a bad version of Second Wind because you have to be enraged to use it. Like Rallying Cry, you don't got to do anything. You just got to press a button, right? So if you're not enraged, or if Blood Rage is on CD or Berserker Rage is on CD, Enrage Regeneration might get limited use. I'm not saying it's bad. Like 30% over 10 seconds isn't. I wish it was over like 5 seconds. If it was over 5 seconds, I think this would be better. But 10 seconds is kind of meh. Where I think Rallying Cry just gives you the 15% health for 10 seconds. That's better to me. And not only just you, your party and your raid. So not just you. So I think Rallying Cry just gets it here. And then for the hands rune, I mean, you can kind of pick, to be quite honest with you. Can't use Quick Strike. You could use Endless Rage. I think Devastate just has better synergy with everything else here, right? So especially Sword and Board, like you're going to be using Devastate to proc Sword and Board. So if you're running Sword and Board, you probably should run Devastate. If you're not running Sword and Board, if you're running like a Wrecking Crew, then you can probably run something else. You still probably would run Devastate, but you could probably run like a Endless Rage or something like that. Generating 25% more rage. This is just for auto attacks, right? Because we're not running Blood Frenzy. So I still think you probably just run Devastate, even if you're not running Sword and Board, but Sword and Board Devastate you can't beat. But yeah, I think this is pretty much a really good setup a really good jump off point, and pretty much you could probably run this rune setup for them like the entirety of phase 2. No one would say anything to you. If you're trying to super parse, again, you can make some changes here and there. Some hard swaps is probably shield mastery for vigilance. Those two are swappable. But other than that, I think you could run this. Oh, like legs 1 2. You can definitely swap out commanding shout and consumed by rage, stuff like that. The leg slides are really a good flexible rune swap. But overall, Warriors pretty good. Pretty good. Looking good, Warriors. Now let's go to my class, the Warlocks. All right, buckle in because we're going to be here for a little bit. Not a little bit. I'm going to try to go through it. Okay, so my Warlock boys. Couple things to note. I went over a couple, maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago. I went over the 3 different types of Warlock tank builds you could run in phase 2. There's an Affliction build, a Demonology build, and a Destruction build. I don't think the Affliction build is going to get much mileage, to be quite honest with you. It just doesn't really have any, super strong talents, not like the Destruction or the Demonology tree. So I think Affliction tanking is kind of going to go to the wayside, right? Especially because in Nomergon, you can't drain life things, right? You can't drain life things because drains are almost like leeches, almost like health drains, almost like bleeds. Bleeds don't work on mechanicals. You get it. Welcome to vanilla. Demonology. Demonology, thanks to Soul Link and Master Demonologist, is going to be the most defensive tank in the game. Promise you it's not even close. We're going to talk about it, but I promise you it's not even close. Soul Link, 30% shared health, basically a 30% DR active at all times as long as you got a pet. Easy clap. If that pet happens to be the Voidwalker, which it probably will because it has the most health and less susceptible of dying, from Master Demonologist, you get a flat 10% reduction to physical damage. Easy. So that's 30% from Soul Link, 10% physical damage from just having the Voidwalker out on a tank that already stacks stamina and armor, which reduces our physical reduction even more. Warlocks now, if you're running the Voidwalker, you have access to sacrifice. So Warlocks are going to be some thick boys. Now, if you choose to go into the Destruction tree, there's a lot of important damage dealing talents in there. Namely, Rune. Rune is probably the most powerful talent for a talent point investment, right? Because it increases the critical strike damage bonus of your destruction spells by 100%. But it's only on a 1 talent point investment. Keep that in mind. It's only on a 1 talent point investment. There are talents that increase your critical strike damage. Rune is the only one, I think, that does it for 1 talent point. And at 100%. At 100%. Like, if you look at the rogue talent, lethality, we can look at it real quick. Oh, actually, if I do that, let me click to the rogue one real quick. We'll go over rogues in a little bit. Oh, I didn't even build out the rogue. That's crazy. But if you look at the rogue talent lethality right here in the assassination tree, lethality is a 5 talent point talent, and it only increases the critical strike damage by 6% per talent point. So that's 30% once you hit max for a 5 talent point investment, whereas Rune is 100% for a 1 talent point. So you do the math. And that's just one example. So Rune is a really, really important and strong talent in the Destruction tree. And obviously there's other things. Rune is tied to Devastation, which is a flat, once you max it out, flat 5% crit chance to your destruction spells. Improved Searing Pain is 2% crit chance for Searing Pain per talent point. Ember Storm, 2% increased fire damage per talent point. Destruction just has a lot of important talents. Intensity is a really important talent for spell pushback protection on your AoE. Destruction, if you want to be, once we get the gear and learning the mechanics out the way and people are flying through Nomergon, Destruction is going to be the big par spec. People are going to just go straight into Destruction and slap up a lot of bosses. So here we have 2 talent trees that you can really bounce back and forth from. Now let's talk about the runes. The first one is Pandemic in the head rune. You get access to Backdraft and Pandemic. I chose Pandemic, but we can look at Backdraft real quick. When you conflagrate, which is the capstone talent in the Destruction tree, you also gain 30% spellcast haste for 10 seconds. So this is good for DPS Warlocks or Warlocks who are using the Incinerate rune. Not really that great for other meta tanks because our primary threat generator is, well, all of our threat generators are instant. Searing Pain's instant, all of our dots are instant, Shadow Cleave is instant. So having spell haste doesn't really do anything. You know what I mean? Like we can't use what is it? Chaos Bolt, because I'm pretty sure it shares the hand rune. Yeah, it shares the metamorphosis slot. So can't use Chaos Bolt. So Backdraft really isn't the greatest tanking rune in my opinion, unless you're running Incinerate. If you're running Incinerate, it's different, and you have to go down into Conflagrate to get that, so you have to invest all of your points into the destruction tree. So Backdraft to me a little bit lackluster for meta tanks. Pandemic, however, is different. So your periodic damage from basically all of your dots, Corruption, Unstable Affliction, Agony, Immolate, all the stuff. All the stuff can now be critical hits. This is really big. This is really big, especially if you're running in the destruction tree where there's a lot of crit modifiers, namely Devastation and Ruin. Like, this is really good. Your dots, critting is really, really big when modified by both these two talents and the other runes we'll talk about in a second here. So I just chose Pandemic off rip. I don't think it's even close, to be honest with you. Next is a polarizing one, the Waste one. So you have the option of Grimoire of Synergy, Invocation, or Shadow and Flame. And all of these to me are pretty decent. All of these to me are pretty decent. Pardon me. But I think Shadow and Flame might be the clear winner. But I think that's because Grimoire Synergy needs a buff. We'll compare those two real quick. So Grimoire Synergy gives you a 30-minute buff that you have a chance to give your demon 5% increased damage, or your demon has a chance to give you 5% increased damage. And it's a 5% chance either way, right? You have a 5% chance to give your demon 5% increased, or your demon has a 5% chance to give you 5% increased damage for 30 minutes. Last 15 seconds. And you don't really have to do anything. You just kind of just buff yourself and you have a chance to get a damage buff. That's not really that bad, right? When you compare that to Shadow and Flame, your critical strikes with fire and shadow spells increase your fire and shadow spell damage done by 10% for 10 seconds. To me, that's just better than Grimoire Synergy, right? Especially if you're running Pandemic and this can proc off of your dot crits. Like, I don't even know how you choose Grimoire Synergy if Shadow and Flame were procking off of dot crits and Searing Pain crit. Like, there's no way you choose Grimoire Synergy. No way. No way. So I think Grimoire Synergy definitely needs a buff. For sure. For sure needs a buff for it to compete with Shadow and Flame, because I don't think there's any way that Shadow and Flame is not better than Grimoire Synergy, to be quite honest with you. Like, if this was like 15%, or maybe increase your damage done and reduce your damage taken by 5%, then I could see it being on a competitive thing. But just a flat damage increase, and then there's no way. All of our spells are shadow and fire, so there's no way. If this was just fire damage or just shadow damage, maybe you could see, because then you would say, okay, I have an increase in this one school of magic, but Grimoire of Synergy increases everything. So either Grimoire Synergy needs a buff or Shadow and Flame needs a nerf. But there's no way you pick Grimoire Synergy over Shadow and Flame, in my opinion. Just my opinion. Now the pet could be the differentiator here. Giving your pet a 5% increase might be more damage. Like, you and your pet, like, having that buff might be bigger damage. But if you're using the Voidwalker doesn't hit for shit. So that's gonna be a little bit lame if you're using like a Succubus or the Imp, maybe. But if you're using the Voidwalker for like Soul Link stuff, I don't think you use Grimoire Synergy. But it's something that I want to be good, something that I want to get buffed. Looking at Invocation, refreshing Corruption, Immolate, Curse, or Siphon when it has less than 6 seconds will instantly cause it to tick is really, really good. Something that I had to train myself for was not refreshing my dots before they rolled off, because in in retail or in later iterations of WoW, you have the pandemic effect, not to be confused with the rune pandemic. But pandemicing a dot means whenever you refresh it before it's about to fall off, the new dot gets a portion of the old duration added to the full duration of the dot. So And I was used to that playstyle. That playstyle has been in the game for years. For years, it's been in the game. So I come back to vanilla, and I'm supposed to just let everything fall off and then reapply. I had to train myself to do that. But Invocation kind of gives mimics that pandemic style feeling. So now when you refresh a dot that has 6 seconds or less, or wait, no, when it has less than 6 seconds, so not 6 seconds or less, but less than 6 seconds, so 5 seconds or less, it will give you that instant tick and then re-roll into the new duration, which I think is pretty good. I don't know how much of a damage increase is going to be, and I think this rune kind of gets a little bit diminished because of other runes like Everlasting Affliction that will just always your corruption will never get to that 5 second threshold because of the way it works. So this one kind of gets a little diminished for me. So I think Invocation might be better for like Affliction DPS warlocks, not tank warlocks, because I just think you get more damage out of Shadow and Flame, for real, for real. Next we have the let's do the chest rune because I think this is an important rune for the other runes. So let's go chest rune. We all know what these runes are because we've been playing with them for a little bit, but I do want to note one thing. I think Master Channeler might go to the wayside because Drain Life can't be used on mechanical mobs. So Drain Life is definitely going, I think Master Channel is definitely going to go to the wayside in lieu of the other ones like Lake of Fire for AoE or just straight up fire damage buff. Especially if you're running, let me just click Lake of Fire. If you're running Lake of Fire and you have the intensity talent, if you're running Destro Tank, you'll get that 70% spell pushback. So it'll definitely guarantee you being able to use a Lake of Fire and get that buff up without having it clipped or having a less likely chance for it to get reduced. And then you can either continue casting Rain or you can cast Hellfire, whatever have you. So this is going to put a band-aid on our AoE. More on that later too. But you could also run Demonic Tactics, which just gives you a flat 10% crit chance to you and your pet. This one doesn't get much use now, but I definitely think it's going to get a lot of use once Shadow and Flame comes into the picture, once Pandemic comes into the picture, because a 10% increase on a rune that gets procced off of criticals, really, really good. And allowing your dots to be crits, Demonic Tactics obviously works with that. So I think Demonic Tactics is probably going to be the one to use. Lake of Fire for AoE. I think Master Channel is going to go to the wayside. It's only going to be used on bosses that you can actually drain, which we just did a count. It's 2 out of the 6. And I don't think Soul Siphon was that good anyway. So I'm going to pick Demonic Tactics. Sorry. Next, let's look at the one that people are probably most excited for, Immolation Aura. But this is on the wrist slot, and it has some competition. So you get the choice of Immolation Aura, Summon Felguard, or Unstable Affliction. And these three, I think these three all have merit. Unstable Affliction is just a stronger dot, like probably stronger than Immolate because you can only have Immolation. You can only have Immolate or Unstable Affliction on the target. You can't have both. I would imagine Unstable Affliction hits harder than Immolate, so you probably, if you are gonna use Unstable Affliction, you're not gonna cast Immolate anymore. You have the Felguard too, and the Felguard's interesting because the Felguard is a pet that always did a lot of damage, right? It had a lot of cool little abilities. The one thing about the Felguard is we don't know what interaction it has with the Master Demonologist talent because Felguards didn't exist in Vanilla, right? It'll still work with Soul Link, right? And it'll be just as good as the Voidwalker because it's just as tanky, has a lot of health, has a lot of armor, right? So the Felguard will be useful. We just don't know to what extent. And even if you're not running Soul Link, let's say you're running Demonic Sacrifice, we don't know what the Felguard does with Demonic Sacrifice or Master Demonologist. There's no real talents in the Demonology tree that work with the Felguard. So it's going to be interesting to see if Blizzard like retroactively adds some kind of synergy with these two talents for the Felguard. But the Felguard is a pretty polarizing pick. I'll say that. And then last, of course, we have Immolation Aura. This is important. So Immolation Aura gives you, from what I can tell, a perma fire aura that just pulses AoE damage every 2 seconds, and it reduces all magic damage taken by 10%. That part right there is taken from Demon Hunters on retail, right? If you play Vengeance, there's a talent that that makes Immolation Aura reduce your magic damage taken. So that part right there is taken from Demon Hunters. So it's a little bit get back since Demon Hunters stole meta. But yeah, you can't tell me that Demo Meta Warlocks aren't going to be the most tankiest boys in existence, right? You can't tell me that. You cannot tell me that. I think I would just pick Immolation Aura because, again, I don't think I would care to use Unstable Affliction, right? Like, it's just another dot, right? It's either I already have Immolate, so if the choice is between Immolate and Unstable Affliction, Unstable Affliction might net me more DPS, but Immolation Aura, just having a perma fire aura, and it reduces magic damage taken, you can't beat. And it gives me AoE profile, and it probably stacks with Shadow and Flame. Like, you can't beat that. You can't beat that. So, Immolation Aura, I think, is the winner here. I'm going to wait to see what Felguard does and the interaction it has with Master Demonologist. But I think in later versions of Master Demonologist, I think what the Felguard did was it reduced or increased your fire and shadow damage done by 5%. I think that's what it did. Whereas like the Succubus increases all damage done by 10%. The Felguard, I think, split it. We can check real quick, I guess. Let me see. What do I want to split off? We can split this one off real quick because I'm curious now. I'm curious to see. Let's see. Warlock. Where are you, Demonology? Why do I see? I know it's here. There it is. Boom. Demonology. Let's see. Where's the Master Demon? Right here. Master Demonologist. Felguard, yeah. Increases all damage done by 5% and reduces all damage taken by 5%. I wouldn't be mad at that. That's actually a pretty good trade-off. I don't know if that iteration would happen for vanilla. I think those numbers would have to kind of get scaled down to like 3 and 3, to be honest. Like, increase all damage done by 3% and reduce all damage taken by 3%. 5 and 5 seems kind of nutty, especially when you're talking about vanilla levels of damage. I think 5 and 5 is a little much, but 3 and 3 should be okay. So that is something we might get for the Warlock version of the Felguard and Master Demonologist. And if that's the case, then you probably use the Felguard on single target fights like the Crowd Pummeler, and then you use Immolation Aura on like AoE pulls and stuff like that. But I feel like most Warlocks are just going to pick AoE Aura just to have it. Next on the feat rune, we have Demonic Knowledge I picked, but there's also the choice of Dance of the Wicked and Shadow Flame. So Demonic Knowledge just gives you a flat spell damage and healing, I guess, equal to 10% of your pet's stamina plus intellect. Obviously, the Felguard and the Voidwalkers have the most stamina. They have a little bit of intellect, but they have the most stamina, so you'll probably get the most net gain by using one of those two pets for this ability. But we'll also have access to the Fell Hunter, and the Fell Hunter I think has a lot of intellect too, so the Fell Hunter probably could be used with Demonic Knowledge, but I think you go Demonic Knowledge here. Dance of the Wicked isn't bad, so you and your demon pet gain dodge chance equal to your spell critical strike chance, and each time you deal a critical strike to the enemy, you gain 2% of your mana. I don't think this is necessarily bad. I just don't think it's necessarily strong, to be quite honest with you. I think most Warlocks are just going to go for Demonic Knowledge. Like, getting dodge is cool and all, but it's like Demonic Grace isn't used because, like, and that gives 30% dodge and crit. So I don't really know. I know it gives a little bit of mana back, right? But who cares? Like, we can life tap. So I think Dance of the Wicked either needs to be changed or, like, significantly buffed. Or maybe not go off of crits. I don't know. Something has to change with Dance of the Wicked because I don't see people using this over Demonic Knowledge. And Shadow Flame, I think Shadow Flame is more so for the DPS boys because Shadow Flame really is just like Dragon Breath without the disorient effect. The dot that it leaves can be consumed by Conflagrate, so that means you don't have to consume your Immolate effect on if you choose to run Conflagrate. So you can kind of look at it like that. As far as tanking is concerned, I think probably for more burst AoE, like if you're running Shadow Flame and Immolation Aura and Shadow and Flame, that's crazy. Shadow and Flame, Shadow Flame and Immolation Aura. I think this is a good, nice little AoE trinity if you need it. But I think for baseline cases, Demonic Knowledge is the way to go. Obviously, we use meta in the hand slot, and I don't think anything new. Yeah, nothing new happened in the hand slot. Even if it did, we need meta to tank. So obviously use meta there. And for the leg slot, so there's nothing new, but I think Everlasting Affliction is the better one. Demonic Grace is just shown to be weak just by comparison to the levels of damage we were taking in BFD. We didn't need Demonic Grace, right? Demonic Pact is one that could come to fruition, to be quite honest with you. Especially since we're higher item level now. We're higher level, and we have more, spell damage to give to the party. So Demonic Pact could come to fruition. But I think Everlasting Affliction is just going to be the mainstay. I think people are kind of done using Incinerate. So Everlasting Affliction to me gets the nod here. But I wouldn't be shocked if people started transitioning to Demonic Pact. I think Destro meta tanks are going to use Incinerate, right? Because it's a fire ability. But for people running the Soul Link run, I think Everlasting Affliction. And that's really it for the Warlock tanks. Obviously, we get a lot of power in the runes. We get a lot of power if we choose to be the Destro tank. So a lot of power to be said in Demonology. I'm excited for Phase 2 Demonology. Really, really good here. All right, we got Paladins, the Pally Boys, the pink class. In Paladins, I feel like they get a lot of quality of life. So I think one of the major things with Paladin tanks is they get access to, pardon me, Holy Shield, right? Holy Shield is in the game to this day. It doesn't do the same thing it does now. But Holy Shield is like a staple for Paladins. This version of Holy Shield, when you get attacked and you block a damage, when you block an attack, you do a little bit of auto attack damage, right? It also increases your block chance, so it increases the chance that you're going to block. So it just fuels the Holy Shield threat, and it's on a short cooldown. So Holy Shield, I think, is a nice power spike. But let's talk about the runes, because I think Paladins have some interesting runes. Starting with the head slot, you have the option of Fanaticism, Improved Sanctuary, Light's Grace, or Wrath. Light's Grace is just for Holy Paladin, so we're just going to X that one out real quick. So the options are Fanaticism, Improved Sanctuary, and Wrath. And I picked Fanaticism because getting a flat 18% crit chance with your holy spells, I think, honestly, is pretty major, right? And holy spells, I'm assuming that means Exorcism, right? I think Judgment is a retribution ability, so I don't think Judgment is included in there. But Exorcism, Avenger Shield, I think, is a prod ability. Actually, we can actually look at this stuff. I'm acting like I'm not on a database. So let me just look at Judgment real quick. Let's see if it comes up. Boom. So it's in the School of Holy, but I think it's in the Ret Tree. It doesn't tell me the category. No. It does not tell me the category, but that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, having a 18% flat increase to your holy spell. So really, Exorcism, Holy Shock, Holy Wrath is another important one. We'll talk about Holy Wrath later too, because Holy Wrath. I think having a flat 18% crit chance it's kind of strong to pass up, right? But let's look at the other ones by comparison. So Improved Sanctuary increases the damage prevented by your Blessing of Sanctuary by 100%. So basically 100% increase on your Blessing of Sanct, and increases the damage done by your by 30% of your shield block value. So looking at Blessing of Sanctuary, it basically gives a small damage reduction, not a percentage based, but a number based, like a flat damage reduction for 5 minutes, right? And if you're able to block, when you do block, you do a little bit of holy damage. So it gives like a Holy Thorn style ability. So it's really only useful for warriors and paladins. So if you put Blessing of Sanctuary on a warrior tank, when they block, they'll do a little bit of holy damage, and they take reduced damage from attacks. This is really useful for AoE tanking, right? If you played in 2019 Vanilla or in TBC Classic, and you played a paladin, you saw paladins doing farms, a lot of them were running Blessing of Sanctuary, like when they run into Strathdome, pull a whole bunch of mobs, drop Consecrate, and hit Holy Shield. A lot of damage came from Holy Shield, but a lot of damage came also from Blessing of Sanctuary. And because you're taking so many little hits at the same time, Blessing of Sanctuary reduced a lot of damage you took. So Improved Blessing of Sanctuary, I think, only gets mileage when you put it on shield tanks. So if you put it on yourself, you get mileage on it. But it's really only, to me, it really only You get the maximum benefit when you're AoE tanking. If you're just single target tanking, you won't really see that much of a damage reduction. You get the Thorns effects, and it's still increased by your Righteous Fury, so it could help with threat gen. It's like having a buff version of Holy Shield on you, so it's not bad, right? It's not bad. This is the defensive play, though. That's what this is. So if you need it, take it. I think these two are pretty interchangeable, right? And then we have Wrath. So Wrath allows your Consecrate to become critical hits, which is pretty important because Wrath, for a long time, Consecration was like the main driving force for AoE tanking. Now they have Divine Storm, which is, it's in the long run, it's not as good as Consecration, but you don't have to invest all these talent points into Divine Storm either. It's just a rune swap. So there's some power to be had there. But allowing your Consecration to be critical is different, is strong, and it allows you for a lot more AoE holding on your threat. And the damage from your Exorcism, Holy Shock, Holy Wrath, and Consecration gains additional critical strike chance equal to your melee crit. So whatever your melee crit is, that'll be the same. It'll be added to your Exorcism and your Holy Wrath in this case, because Paladins don't have Holy Shock. So if you have 25% melee crit, that 25% melee crit is going to get added to the Exorcism crit chance, which is pretty decent, right? Here's the trade-off between Fanaticism and Wrath. Fanaticism doesn't make your Consecration crit, right? That's number one. It will give your Exorcism and your Holy Wrath an 18% chance to crit, which may be higher than your melee critical strike chance, right? I don't really know if I count the Consecration crit as a big deal because Paladins are already good at AoE tanking. They don't need Consecration critting to be good at AoE tanking, right? They have Holy Shield now. They're going to have access to Blessing of Sanctuary. They have Divine Storm. They have regular Consecration if they don't have Divine Storm. Like, they don't need Consecration to crit for it to be, for them to be effective AoE tanks. Now, if you have more melee crit than you do 18%, then by all means, take Wrath. But I think before we get to that, before the melee crit goes above that 18% threshold, I think Fanaticism is better. From a defensive standpoint, Sanctuary is obviously better than both of these, but I think Fanaticism is better. So it's up to you to pick which one you want. I just picked Fanaticism on the gear up. Improved Sanctuary will happen depending on the fight that you're tanking, right? Or if it's an ad fight, you might need it. And then Wrath is really, really good for AoE tanking. Like, once you drop if you drop a Consecrate that's critting, nothing's going to pull off you in that AoE regard. But the mileage that you get from it is going to be varied, in my opinion. Until you pass, unless your melee critical strike chance passes that 18%, then we'll see. Next, we have the Waste Slot. We have Enlightened Judgments, Infusion of Light, and Sheath of Light. So Infusion of Light, again, that's just Holy Paladin, so we're going to not talk about that one. Enlightened Judgments increases the range of your judgment by 30 yards, which is crazy. Nice, really, really good. And it gives you 17% spell hit. Sheath of Light will read, dealing damage with your melee weapon increases your spell power by an amount equal to 30% of your attack power. So whatever your attack power is, take 30% of that, it gets added to your spell power. In addition, that's for 1 minute. In addition, your critical healing spells will also give the target a small hot, right? Cool. Sheath of Light is better for single target damage, obviously. However, it's hard pressed to give up instant spell hit cap and 30-yard range on Judgment. I feel like once you use Enlightened Judgments, like once you slot that in and you're using it, whatever, and you swap out of it, it's going to feel horrible. It's going to feel horrible. You're going to be like, yo, Judgment is only hitting in melee range. I'm missing with my extra. Like, it's going to feel bad. Now, it might not feel as bad every single fight, like on Crowd Pummeler, who probably is going to be the patchwork fight, and you're just standing still. Sheath of Light is going to do better, right? There's nothing else to hit. The boss is in front of you. No need to have Judgment on such a far range, right? Sheath of Light is probably going to put more work in on that fight. But, my God, not having that instant spell cap and a 30-yard range on Judgment is probably not going to feel the greatest when you're not using it. So I gave the nod just for utility's sake to Enlighten Judgments. But Sheath of Light is probably going to do more single target damage and threat. Keep that in mind. So these two are probably going to be interchangeable depending on the fight. Next, let's go wrists. So wrists, we have improved Hammer of Wrath or Purifying Power. So improved Hammer of Wrath, the cooldown on Hammer of Wrath is reset each time it deals damage to an enemy below 10%. So it just gives you more execute damage. It's not bad. I don't think this is bad. I think you get a little more power out of Purifying Power. Reduces the cooldown on your Exorcism by 50%, your Exorcism and Holy Wrath. And and Holy Wrath can be cast on any target and will stun undead mobs and demons for 2 seconds. So here we have your Exorcism that's already going to get powered up from Fanaticism, right? Your Exorcism is going to get powered up, and Holy Wrath. Both of these spells are going to get powered up by Fanaticism. The cooldown is going to be reduced. Let's just look at the Exorcism cooldown real quick, because I don't know what the cooldown is on Exorcism. It's a 15-second cooldown. So that goes to what? 7.5? Not bad. What's Holy Wrath's cooldown? 1 minute. So that goes to 30 seconds. Crazy quality of life. So having a 7-second or a 7.5 second Exorcism and a 30-second Holy Wrath that can be used on any target, I think Purifying Power is the winner. I think Purifying Power is the easy winner. This might be good for PvP. Like just slamming Hammer of Wraths into a target under 10%. Yeah, you might kill some kids, but I think for PvE, Purifying Power is the move. Let's go to the feat rune. We got Guarded by the Light, Sacred Shield, or the Art of War. So all of these have some kind of use for prot. I think by virtue of all of the other runes I've talked about, Guarded by Light is the better one, because when you hit your target with a melee weapon, you gain 5% of your maximum mana for 15 seconds. If you're running Guarded by Light and you're running Purifying Power, so you have these two pretty mana-hungry spells on a shorter cooldown, you're going to need more mana return. So that's where Guarded by Light comes in. And I think just by virtue of that, Guarded by Light takes the cake for me. Sacred Shield and Art of War aren't bad. So if you look at Sacred Shield, each time the target takes damage, they gain Sacred Shield, absorbing 500 damage, increasing the paladin's chance to critically hit with Flash of Light. So in Wrath, when Sacred Shield got introduced, Sacred Shield could be put on by the Protection Paladin himself if there was no Holy Paladin healing them. Keep in mind, it's Wrath. There's Holy Paladins everywhere. So for the most part, a prop paladin, unless it was a 10-man you didn't have a Holy Paladin, a prop paladin never had to cast their own Sacred Shield on themselves. But you could in vanilla. You could do this because Holy Paladins really aren't that popular right now. So using Sacred Shield as kind of the defensive pick might be a way to go. I would warn that if you're not running Guarded by Light, you might have some mana constraints, especially for this, like the higher rank spells that they're gonna get. But you could run Sacred Shield as a defensive pick. The Flash of Light synergy really won't work for you because you can't block when you're casting something, and to stop to cast Flash of Light, you're probably not gonna you're gonna heal probably the same amount that you just took by not blocking. So it's probably not a point to do that, but it's there. You could put Sacred Shield on like your co-tank and heal them up if they need it, I guess, like for the utility play. But I think Guarded by Light is just better. And the Art of War, your critical strikes reset the cooldown of Holy Shock and Exorcism. That's not bad. Not bad at all. But it's melee criticals. If this was just your criticals, I would say this goes right into Fanaticism's play. But it's melee crits. So your not Crusader Strike, your Judgment probably works with this, because Judgment for a long time was considered a melee ability. So Judgment might work with this, but this is just not that practical for prop paladins. And if you look at the other talents we have, Aegis, Avenger Shield, and Hand of Reckoning. Hand of Reckoning, I think you're probably never going to not take, right? Because you want to taunt and it increases the effectiveness of your Righteous Fury. Like, you're never not going to take that. Avenger Shield will see probably some swapping in and out, especially since it shares a rune slot with Exorcist and Rebuke. So Avenger Shield isn't always taken, especially if you're running Fanaticism. Like, you can easy swap out Avenger Shield, right? You could easy swap out Avenger Shield and get Exorcist, and now It can be cast on any target and has 100% increased crit chance on undead mobs. And you're running Purifying Power, so it's reduced by the mana cost is the cooldown is reduced by 50%. My bad. And it's fueled by Fanaticism. So you could drop Avenger Shield if you don't need it. If you're fighting a single target fight and get Exorcist, you could drop it for Rebuke if you need it interrupt and there's no one else in the party. You don't have a rogue, you don't have a warrior, don't have a druid with Skull Bash. If you need Divine Sack, Divine Sack I thought would be better because of what it does in Wrath, but the Divine Guardian part, the sub talent that's connected to Divine Sack, isn't in vanilla, and this only works on party. It's only as a damage redirect, and there wasn't really a lot of damage that really warranted Paladins taking Divine Sacrifice and BFD anyway. So Divine Sacrifice, I'm sad that it wasn't more impactful, but I can definitely see people dropping Avenger's Shield for Exorcist or Rebuke. So you just got to pick what you need. Aegis is another one that didn't really see too much usage because it shares a slot with Divine Storm and Seal of the Martyr, which are just really good for AoE and single target respectively. I'm hoping that Aegis comes to more fruition because we're going to be using things like, we're going to be using things like Guarded by Light, and we're going to be probably fighting things that hit harder and warrant Aegis. And we have things like Holy Shield and Blessing of Sanctuary to kind of fuel Aegis's power. So I'm hoping Aegis becomes a thing, but if not, you're still just going to use Divine Storm for AoE, Seal of Martyrdom for single target. But this is more of a wishful thinking pick. This isn't a you should pick this pick all the time. So, I mean, if it's phenomenal, like if we're taking the damage to warrant it and we're just making the use out of both of these abilities and we're using Improved Sanctuary, like this little block combo here, probably be dope. So keep that in mind. And that's really it for the Paladins. I think Paladins are going to be in a slightly better position than where they were at in BFD. They did really well, obviously, on AoE. They're really good AoE tanks. They did okay in single target. They did okay, but now I think they have a little bit more single target centric tools. Obviously, we got the Fanaticism or the swap in Wrath if you need it. We have Enlightened Judgment or Sheath of Light for a really, really like single target mainstay. We got Sheath of Light now. Purifying Power is going to help in single target. Guarded by Light is going to help fuel your mana, which is going to help obviously give you more threat. So we got a couple of things here. So I think Paladins will be in a better place than where they were at in phase 1. Don't think they're going to overtake like Warlocks or anything in the single target threat department, but they'll be better. Let's close some of the stuff that I'm not looking at. All right, moving on. Shamans. Shaman boys. So Shamans, hold on, let me actually sip some. As you can see with the runes, Shamans haven't had all of their runes data mined just yet. So, like I said in the beginning of the stream, I'm going to come back to Shamans, both Shamans and Rogues. Rogues don't have it all either. I think they're, what are they? Oh no, Rogues might have, no, Rogues, there's a broken rune in Rogues. I'll show you real quick. Like the waist has Shadow Step, but the legs also have Shadow Step. So that's probably a oversight, right? So I'll come back for the updates to Rogues and Shamans, but we'll go over it right now. So nothing really changes for Shamans in the chest and the leg slot because you need Way of Earth to tank, and there's nothing here better than Shield Mastery for tanking anyway. So these two things are unchanged, right? The hand slot, Molten Blast is just really too strong unless you're really mana starved. The Water Shield is the move, but Molten Blast is the move, right? So the two new rune slots, Waist and Feet. Let's talk about the Feet. I think that's the most interesting one, to be quite honest with you. So they get the choice of Ancestral Awakening, Decoy Totem, and Spirit of the Alpha. Ancestral Awakening is more so for Resto Shamans. When you heal something with Lesser Heal or Healing Wave, another random target within 40 yards will get healed for 30% of that amount. So yeah, that's really just a Resto thing, right? Decoy Totem is interesting. So it drops a totem that will redirect. It's kind of like Grounding Totem in a way. Like it drops a totem that redirects the next melee or ranged attack made against the target to the totem. So if you drop it, the next I'm assuming this is how it works. If you're fighting a boss, the next auto attack is going to go to the totem instead of you. If you time it right, you can probably get a couple abilities. That's the way I kind of read Decoy Totem. We got to wait and see on what abilities, if it works on abilities, if it only works on auto attacks, we got to wait and see to that regard. It also gives you an immunity to movement impairing effects for 10 seconds, so you can't be rooted, stuff like that. That's a pretty big PvP play because like enhanced shamans get like that two-handed weapon mastery, and then there's like the crowd pummel they can use. And if you can't root them or you can't kite them, they're gonna slam your face in. So decoy totem probably has better implications in PvP than it does in PvE. But then we got the other one, Spirit of the Alpha. So this is like the inverse of Blessing of Salvation. So Spirit of the Alpha increases all threat generated by the target that you buff by 45% for 30 minutes, right? You can only put it on one target. And I said this is the inverse of Salve because Salve reduces the threat of the target. I don't remember how much it does. Let me check. I don't think it's 45%. That'd be kind of nutty. Let me see. Blessing of Salvation. Oh, it is 30. Okay, it's not 45, but it's 30. Okay, so 30%. That's close. That's close. So the thing with Salve, though, is Salve you can put on everybody. Spirit of the Alpha you can only put on one person. So Spirit of the Alpha will increase, namely the tank, the person who you want to have the threat, their threat by 45%. And it kind of evens out the disparity of, oh, well, Horde had Wind Fury, Alliance had Salve. Salve made Alliance probably better in the PvE scenario. And then in SOD, where Druids are now bringing Wind Fury, there really wasn't something that, like, Horde didn't have a Salve equivalent until now. So instead of getting a threat decrease, they're getting a single target threat increase. I think it's a pretty interesting take, and I think Shamans are probably going to take this rune here, to be quite honest with you. And if you have two Shamans in your raid group, you can put them on both tanks, and both tanks will hopefully never have threat issues. Can you imagine a Warlock with Spirit of the Alpha on them? Jesus Christ. The threat, oh my Lord. I thought it'd be so amazing. All right, let's go to the waste. We have Fire Nova Totem, Maelstrom Weapon, and Power Surge. So, Fire Nova Totem. So, your Fire Nova Totem spell is replaced with Fire Nova, causing your current Fire Totem to basically explode for fire damage. So, instead of having to use a Fire Nova Totem, so instead of replacing like your Searing Totem or your Flame Tongue Totem, you can just Fire Nova off of your current Fire Totem. So, this is a pretty good quality of life change for not really tank shamans, because they had Molten Blast, which already did pretty decent AoE threat. But this is just another one. This is like adding a Consecration. Like if Paladins can run Consecrate and Divine Storm, right? Like they're just going to be gods at AoE tanking, basically. So you could run Fire Nova Totem. I decided to pick Maelstrom Weapon because I think Maelstrom Weapon has better single target applications than Fire Nova will. And Power Surge really is just for Power Surge is for shamans that primarily spec'd into the elemental tree, which I think might go to the wayside as we get later into 40. So I really think Power Surge is really only for like the Caster Boy shamans. In Maelstrom Weapon, again, when you melee attack, you have a chance to reduce the cast time and cost of your Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, your heal spells, and your Lava Burst, stacking 5 times. So you can use a max stack Maelstrom on a Lightning Bolt. If you're AoE tanking, you can use a max stack on a Chain Lightning and get that instant cast out. So I think this is going to just be the way more well-rounded rune. Like Fire Nova and Power Surge are good, but I think Maelstrom is just more well-rounded. And that's really it. Not too much to talk about for the Shaman runes because, again, not everything has been revealed just yet. I think when it comes to the talent power, they're obviously getting the defensive benefit of being able to spec into parry. Being able to parry is going to be big for them, for a big defensive power boost. Having Storm Strike. So Storm Strike is going to be interesting because Storm Strike was a capstone that really wasn't used in the Shaman category because Storm Strike puts a debuff on the target. Number one, in vanilla, there was a debuff limit and Storm Strike was a weak debuff, so you really didn't want that up there. Number two, Storm Strike increases the nature damage of the next 2 hits by 20% for 12 seconds. But it's not indicative only to the Shaman. So like a Druid who casts Wrath could absorb that 20% increase. A Hunter Serpent Sting Totem could absorb that 20% increase. So you, as the Shaman, really weren't even getting the use out of your Storm Strike. So I hope they change that interaction. I mean, the debuff limit is gone now, so we don't have to worry about that part. But I hope they change it so that Storm Strike only works with the Shaman abilities That way shamans can actually use their capstone, because if it's still the same as what it was before, I don't know. It feels pretty hurtful to me. They do get access. I said parry. They get access to Storm Strike. We'll see what it does. They have Weapon Mastery now, increasing all the damage with weapons by 10%. And we saw in my weapons video that there's going to be some pretty crazy weapons coming in Nomergon. They're going to have access to improved Windfury Totem, which is going to be a nice big power boost for not only the shaman but their party as well. They're going to be able to max out Flurry. So shamans get some pretty interesting talents. Nothing too major, nothing too crazy. And we got to wait and see what we get when it comes to the other rune slots. And then lastly, we have the Rogue Boys. I didn't build this out. Let me build it out real quick, I guess, just for reference. I think this is pretty generic here. What else should I do? I guess, yeah, Sinister Strike, boom, just to help get down there. I don't think they take daggers, but you know what? I'm not gonna try to do a real build. I don't think I could do that right now. Let's see. Let's just do this one. Boom. That one seems pretty good. Blade Flurry is something they've been waiting on for a long time. Sword Spec, I think, is the better one, but there are some pretty good fist weapons we saw. There are some pretty good fist weapons. Aggression is pretty good. Weapon expertise is pretty good, and the last talent point goes into Adrenaline Rush. Easy. So that's kind of a rushed build. Don't quote me on this build. This might not be the build that you want to use, but hey, it's there. Now looking at the runes. So again, we said that the leg rune has that shadow step. I don't think that's supposed to be there, so that's probably an oversight. But looking at the head rune, so let's see. We got combat potency, focused attacks, and honor among thieves. All three of these are pretty decent. So combat potency gives you a 20% chance to gain 15 energy when you deal damage with your offhand. Focused attack gives you 2 energy every time you deal damage or deal melee or ranged critical. I don't know if focused attacks works off auto attacks. If they do, that's pretty good. If they don't, I feel like that might be a little on the weaker side. And Honor Among Thieves gives you a combo point whenever you or someone in your party gets a critical hit. Can't happen more than once every second. I think Honor Among Thieves is the more consistent thing, and it gives you the most power over a longer period of time. If focused attacks works off of auto attacks, this might be the play, just for that consistent energy gain. But I think Honor, just the way things look right now, I think Honor Among Thieves might be the better one. For DPS rogues, they might take combat potency, but I think Honor Among Thieves for tank rogues might be the better one, might be the bigger play. For the waist slot, we have Poison Knife, Shadow Step, and Shuriken Toss. I think it's a no-brainer. If you're tanking anything AoE, you take Shuriken Toss. It doesn't matter. If you're in a dungeon, you take Shuriken Toss. Easy clap. Shadow Step really... So this version of Shadow Step, it looks like it only works on enemies. It doesn't work on your friendly targets. So you can only Shadow Step to an enemy. It gives you a 70% movement speed increase for 3 seconds. This is really good for positioning if an ad spawns out of your range and you want to Shadow Step to it, right? It's really good for repositioning and stuff like that. Not so much, doesn't really have any DPS or threat implications. It's just a good utility move. So keep that in mind. And then we have Poison Knife, which instantly throws your offhand to deal normal damage with a 100% chance to apply the poison on your offhand and awards a combo point. It also benefits from any talents or effects that work off of Sinister Strike. For me, Poison Knife is good. It does damage, it awards a combo point, right? Let's see if I can find the energy cost on it. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't have. Oh, it says it doesn't have a cost. I think that'll get changed. I think that'll probably get changed. But it does do a combo point. It does do 100%. No, it has a 100% chance to apply your poison. It does damage with your offhand damage. The problem here is that in Nomergon, you have a lot of mechanicals. Mechanicals can't be poisoned, so you kind of lose some of the value from this ability. Now it's just a good DPS ability, right? If you don't want to use Shadow Step, you can use Poison Knife. Easy clap. But keep in mind that if you're fighting a mechanical, they won't get poisoned. You can use it for a combo point generator, I guess, as a ranged combo point generator, which is not that bad. So keep that in mind when using Poison Knife. If you're fighting a mechanical, it won't apply that poison. Next, let's go to the feet rune. So the feet. That's what they call it. We have Master of Subtlety, Rolling with the Punches, and Waylay. And I don't think it's even close. You take Rolling with the Punches. Each time you dodge or parry, you gain 6% increased health, stacking 5 times. So 30% increase to your health on a class that doesn't have any health modifiers, right? Just a flesh wound doesn't increase your health. And rogues don't have any stamina or health increases in their talent build. So rolling with the punches is just a really, really good defensive benefit. Now, Master of Subtlety, I think, could get some play because when you attack while stealth and for 6 seconds after, your damage is increased by 10%. Obviously, you can tie this in the beginning of the fight when you're stealth, and you can like get that 10%, that free 10% increase, right? A good, nice threat bonus. You can tie this into Vanish. However, if you're actively tanking and you vanish, you're gonna lose all threat, so that might not be an ideal move. If you're not tanking, that's different. But yeah, you can kind of tie it with Vanish, I guess. Waylay only works with Ambush and Backstab. We don't use either of those abilities as a rogue tank, so can't really make use of this too much unless you're not tanking. So that's why I think rolling with the punches is just a perfect rune. Nice defensive increase. Don't really have to do anything to maintain it. You just dodge or parry. Rogues have a lot of avoidance, so that just goes hand in hand. With the runes that we already have, I think they're pretty much set. You have to use just a flesh wound. For the leg slot, you don't have to use Blade Dance, but it would probably be better for you, especially early on in Omegon, and especially if you're using rolling with the punches just to help your survivability, definitely. And for main gauge, I see a lot of rogues use Saber Lash, which is fine because if you don't need that parry, then you don't have to use it. The thing with Saber Lash, though, again, if you're fighting a mechanical, you can't benefit from the bleed effect. And if you can't bleed something with Saber Lash, then you're just better off using Sinister Strike because it does more damage. So if you can't use Saber Lash's bleed effect, just get main gauge and get that 10% increase, help fuel that rolling with the punches, and move on from there. As far as their power when it comes to talents, Adrenaline Rush is a big CD, so they're definitely going to make use of that. Blade Flurry is a big CD, but since they have Shuriken Toss, now they'll be good outside of that 2-minute window. So I think the combination of Blade Flurry and Shuriken Toss will definitely help patch over their AoE weakness. And rogues also still get pretty good abilities. Obviously, they get Sword Specialization, which is a really good talent. They get Aggression, they get Weapon Expertise, which gives you weapon skill, right? So they get a lot in the combat tree. They could even go into the Assassination tree and get the increased crit with Malice, get the increased crit damage with lethality. They can get Relentless Strikes, which gives you a 20% chance to get some energy back on your finisher. Like, rogues have a lot of talent flexibility. So I think I don't think you'll see any assassination tanks, like, because Vigor's just kind of a bad talent. Cold Blood is okay. Seal Fate is definitely okay, but you lose a lot of defensive power going in the assassination tree. You lose a lot of defensive power, so keep that in mind. Subtlety, I still think the verdict's out. It does have things like Pre-Med and Ghostly Strike, but again, you lose a lot of that passive defensive avoidance not being combat, so I don't think, even with things like Ghostly Strike, I don't think you can you can't really justify it yet. So keep that in mind. And that's really it for the rune breakdown. Like I said before, I will return to the Rogue and the Shamans because I want to see what they update with. But that's really it for the stream, guys. I appreciate you joining with me. You guys already know the drill. You've been great. I've been Soul, and I'm out. Peace. I might stream a little later on with Keys. Who knows? But we'll see. But that's it, guys. Heading out.